Hello, my name is Tolg, and I'm pretty sure I exist. And so I think too much. So, there is a psychological understanding of what makes the subconscious and the conscious. Conscience? I never know whether to put the end there or not. I struggle with that a lot. But the subconscious is created in the years 0 to 6. So what is in your environment, what surrounds you, what information you're fed from the years 0 to 6 is what makes your subconscious drive. What you run on without fully acknowledging that's what you run on. Habits and patterns that you're not fully aware of. Then the years 6 to 10 make up what drives your consciousness, why your habits consciously exist the way they do. And then 10 to 15, you are testing the waters and figuring out, because 12 to 25 is the structuring of your amygdala, which is your social understanding. So 10 to 15, you're testing society and where you fit in it and how you want to fit in it. You're developing a personality, essentially. And then 15 to 25 or 26 or 28, it's not a set time. You're doing the end, other side of finding yourself in society, settling into how you created your personality. The reason I say all of this, there has been a highlight on the wage gap between poverty and upper class with this current presidency in 2025. And with that became highlighted a difference between new money and old money, as well as, and I haven't heard it mentioned too much, but old poor and new poor. And I'm sure there are sociological, anthropological understandings or studies done on this concept, and I am so sure that I am not the first person to contemplate it. But, how culture teaches you, in whichever side of that you end up on, how culture teaches you how to deal with what you have versus if you grow up without culture. And what I mean by without culture, because technically everybody grows up with a culture, but it is my understanding that every single individual in the US is suffering diaspora to different extent. And I think the only people that would readily acknowledge they're suffering from diaspora are people of color. But if you actually look at it, no white person in the US is from the US. And every single white person in the US doesn't necessarily come directly from one country. Their genetics are dispersed through many different countries. Mine, I think I have 7 to 8 that I might be tied to. And so trying to tie that down to one culture that your family prominently practices, by that point that you've lived however many generations in the US, it is definitely watered down by not living in that country, essentially, not developing with that country. You're outside of it. And then you have the indigenous in the US who have had a lot of their culture stolen from them, purposefully erased, in that it was oftentimes not written down, orally taught history and customs. And then you had all of these schools taking in indigenous children, or foster care taking in indigenous children, orphanages and the like, to separate them from the elders so they would not be taught their own culture. And then, the cutting of the hair. And I read a book, granted it was fiction, but it was about, practices of that time, where a lady was wire scrubbing, using a wire sponge or scrub on the skin of an indigenous child, saying, well, we can just wash you white, which it is my understanding of the time that was actually believed to be true. But there are so many things that happened to alienate the individuals that are attempting to practice indigenous cultures from what is inherent, what should have been inherited, making it mild diaspora, because I think within more recent generations they've been able to claim a hell of a lot back, and fucking great, heal, please. All of this to say, to put a highlight rather on the pack animal comment I made in another video, and that it is human nature to form tribes and practice tribalism therein, which is where you get these terms, white and black, which I find constantly hilarious anytime I say it, because of, side tangent, I was never drawn to any one specific color, and everybody asks what's your favorite color when you're a child trying to get to know each other. And so I think in middle school I was like, well, I'm gonna be philosophical about it, and I'm not necessarily drawn to any one color, so why not make that my favorite color, and it'll be gray because it's the middle ground. And to this day, charcoal gray remains my favorite color because, it's a very complimentary color. You can put it in any wardrobe. I like it, and it's calming as a paint if you paint your rooms in it. And then you can add any accent color. So as far as being attracted to a color, charcoal gray is my favorite. Side tangent done. So there is a middle ground between black and white, and the reason that I find the terminology and trying to separate races and groups of people by calling them simply black and white is exactly the metaphor of not everything is black and white. There is a gray area. There's a hell of a lot going on outside of that. And that's overly simplified. But the reason, again, to address things in such an overly simplified way is because the U.S. does not consist of any one peoples at all. And so there was a time in which, in the 90s, I think we were all told it's a soup, a mixing pot, I think. And then in, late 90s, early 2000s, it changed to a salad because they're like, well, we shouldn't blend together. And I remember as children, I don't know if everybody had the same childhood, but sorry, I'm having an allergic reaction right now to something. The whole idea of a mixing bowl and a salad was because we were supposed to honor each other. And we were brought up believing, I was brought up believing, and reading all these childhood books of hey, let's acknowledge other people's cultures. They exist. Yay. Aren't we special as a country because we're all different and we can come together with our differences. And we get to, especially in these childhood books with, pictures, they're oversimplified ideas of what is happening in a very adult setting. And so the childhood simplification was, we can all enjoy each other's food. Isn't this so much better now? And generally speaking, I have no idea what's wrong with me, but I kind of kept that because I never went to one school more than 2 years. So throughout elementary, I went to one school for 2 years, but those 2 years that I went to that one school were split with going to a different school in between. So very technically, I was just, each year of elementary school was a different school. And Middle school was the first time I went to one school consistently for the whole duration of it. High school, I only spent 2 years there, and then I got my GED. Now you know me too personally. All of this to say that my social skills are really weird. Barely there. I think I can socialize, but I don't catch a lot of things going on and don't understand things until someone explains it to me, and realize a lot went over my head. And I'll think like I'm really smart and I caught so much, but it's all based on survival mechanism. I can catch very specific things, but not common things. So like, I tell my significant other all the time that he has uncommon knowledge, not common knowledge. And I think that's generally how I view myself as well. So, all of this to say, circling all the way back to the 0 to 6 is your subconscious, 6 to 10 is your conscious, and then conscience. And then, 10 to 25 to 28 is your social understanding of everything. I am now 32, so my amygdala is supposed to be fully developed. It's supposed to be. And, I have noticed in the US specifically, because I don't go to other countries, the tribalism here is confused. And then you add in the level of technology everybody's working with, and everybody's confused. And I feel like everybody's just as confused as I always thought I was, more confused than others, on how to socialize given that tribalism. And I mention my own experience with life to say that I am very used to being othered. I didn't develop around one group of peoples. I did not develop around any common culture. I was also in different households growing up, so my subconscious was brought up around different families, so there was no common habit. And so when I said my survival mechanism, I look at uncommon things. It was developed because of that. And I don't think this is either good or bad. It's just what it is. But all of this to say, I'm very, very used to being othered. I'm either too white to know what's going on, or I was invited to an ex invited me to their New Year's party with their family and their family's clients. And I guess to explain this, you would have to be from Omaha and you would have to acknowledge it, which not a lot of people from Omaha acknowledge it. Omaha is incredibly segregated. Still. It has South Omaha, which is primarily Hispanic. It was initially Little Bohemia, and it was all of the white migrants that weren't the right kind of white. Like, there's Little Italy down there, and there's Little Czechoslovakia, and I think Little Serbia, so they call it Little Bohemia. And then there's South Omaha, which is, and that's at the border of South Omaha, downtown, and North Omaha's Little Bohemia. And then there's South Omaha, which is Hispanic primarily. And then to the left of that, and it's all by the river, to the left of that you have downtown, which is tourism and where others go to spend their money. And then further from there, further left of that, you have North Omaha, which is primarily black. Then you go out west, and that's all East Omaha. You go out west Omaha, and that's primarily white. And there's like middle ground. There's a gray area between where people, are intermixed based on wages, how much they earn. But that is essentially Omaha. And this ex of mine lived out in West Omaha. I grew up primarily in South Omaha. I had some places I lived in West Omaha, but most of my years growing up was spent in South Omaha. And the schools I went to were not primarily white. They were just small versions of the world. They had anyone from everywhere. And I feel lucky for that. Because I was wildly ignorant. And so it did, teach me more than my my mom did. So I'm really, really happy that, I had that experience. But all of this to say, when I went out west, they called me exotic. We were playing this card game, and it was a winter sports. You had to guess the winter sport thing, write it down or something. To which the family friend looked at me and said, "Now don't do anything too exotic, because we'll know it's you." And it was all well-meaning, but it signified that I am not the comfortable type of white they're used to. And then other people will press me and say that I look Asian and not let me say I'm white. Some people will say I'm too white to know what they went through. And I just learned, I don't belong. So, but in, I guess, a easier way to deal with than most people feel when they don't belong, maybe. Because people will still right off the bat treat me for how I look. And then I say something. And I know I can still blend in, but I don't pull it off well half the time. There's always a giveaway. So in this whole tribalism, I've been able to notice, given that position in the US, that when people find someone they belong to, somewhere they belong to, they always need someone to not belong. That contrast provides them a better understanding of their own being in that group, their own belonging to that group. And me being new to each school made it very convenient to other me. It doesn't so much have anything to do with how I look as it does have to do with how much time other people experienced with me, and in contrast without me there. So middle school was the most comfortable I had ever been. And I continue to watch these things on YouTube. With one that got me recently was hair. Like, I look at hair tutorials because it's calming. And so there's a huge debate, like a very huge debate on, do you have curly hair, or you're just doing this and you have straight hair? And there's like gatekeeping for who has curly hair, and how dare you insult the curly hair girls by doing the curly hair care routine. And it is, at this point in the US, everybody's suffering so much diaspora that they're all desperate to belong somewhere. And it could be the most stupid fucking thing, like Labubu helps you feel like you belong to something, because now you're excited with a group of people who are excited, and it feels good to be a part of it. But I think the thing that I find most problematic about it is that everybody's so desperate about belonging and feeling like they have somewhere that half the time I don't think they're looking at what the fuck they actually belong to. And what they're trying to represent by it. And again, everybody needs to other someone so that they feel a part of something. So when you have belonged to something, does it help you identify yourself to an extent that your security is substantial? Personally, when people have found groups, and I haven't, I feel like my insecurities are exploited so that other people can feel more secure. And I can have all the understanding I want for it, and I can be educated on it as much as I could fathom, but I can't help anybody to feel more secure, especially if where I'm already coming from is insecurity. And I don't think I'm the only one. I'm very sure that this is a very normal thing to feel in the US. I hope all of that made sense. I'm pretty sure I'm done talking. Oh, I guess the 0 to 6 thing, that was just bothering me recently. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but I guess it's relevant by like who took care of you and old money, new money. Sorry. US has constantly throughout generations split it up based on race. Old money, new money, old poor, new poor. And with this increasing wage gap, you're seeing people that thought they were middle class and felt privileged in being middle class become poor, being new poor. And old poor is like, you're being stupid about how you're spending things. That's not going to last you. And new poor is saying, well, it's your fault, old poor. You brought me down with you. And I do think that this plays a huge part into furthering this tribalism that everybody suffers in the US. Because again, you need someone to be the other. And when two groups start to merge and against one group's will because they were privileged prior, they're less apt to kick the privileged people because they eventually want to be them. And they, in that position, would not want themselves to be kicked. So everybody tends to kick down. And if you have been throughout the years treated like you are the lowest, you have learned generational contempt of anybody that you've been told you are lower than. And so all that I see and all that I understand is just fucking constant turmoil. Everybody is constantly emotionally suffering turmoil. And I think that is absolutely purposefully being exploited. And that's probably what we should be paying attention to. You know, not furthering that exploitation. Okay, bye.